like to ask a question. Yes, sir. Mr. IBM.
I got a big mouth. Can you hear me okay?
I'll just hold it so they can.
So this is a three-part question, and I want to go ahead and hit the very thing that you mentioned in terms of security analytics. And Kevin, this is for you as well. So the issue you have is that when you look at the financing aspect of, a smart infrastructure, and if you look at the contractors today, they're the ESCOs. And remember, they base what they do on the thing that they make. So all of a sudden, if you have a dollar for an item, their view of that item is the profit that they make on that item. The problem you have is that when you have a Johnson, a Honeywell, a Nebraska, or a Masco, when you take all of those together, you need to have a broader view, which then goes into the analytics piece, okay? So you can't keep these things as separate. The other thing is that from a security perspective, the question I would have for you and Kevin is that what if you were to take the ESCOs that you have today, do a new solicitation of ESCOs, and include security and analytics in the RFI or the RFP? Because then what will happen is that instead of looking at just the building management piece, you're going to look at water, gray water, black water, lighting. You're going to be able to look at all of that. And then the very question of the facilities manager, the CIO, and all of that, all of a sudden you have kind of a holistic view of analytics and how can I cut costs, not in terms of just the building management piece, but when you go to IP-enabled lighting, all of a sudden you now need to look at that differently. So the challenge that I would have for you is that I would take the ESCOs that you have today, I would come out with another ESCO RFI or RFP, put the security and the analytics piece in that, because I can tell you, if you were to give some of the ESCOs a blank check and add 2 vendors' products into the building and a blank check, they will not solve that problem. So I would come out with a new RFI, new RFP, add analytics, add security into it, and have them look at that from a vendor agnostic view. And I can tell you the IBMs and a lot of the other companies, they would jump all over that RFI or RFP.
I think what I've heard is Mr. Wells is volunteering to work on new policies.
Kevin's got to respond. No, Kevin's got to respond.
Yeah, we'll rely on Kevin, our procurement expert on this.
Well, first of all, we are working on a new RFI, RFP, and that's a terrific idea. I'm not on the teams. I don't know whether it's in there, but I'll make sure that they do consider that. The way GSA is handling that is that we have sort of, you built it for us, a system. We require, and we have actually 2 systems that are running in parallel with each other, which we're trying to figure out how not to do for very much longer, but and we require them to tie in to what we've got. So we do actually have the big data analytics capability. And I think you're right in one sense that the ESCOs are very different one from another. Of course, they are required by contract to claim that they are product agnostic, but it's very hard for Johnson Controls to put in a Siemens system. It just, something happens to their mechanics' hands, and they begin to shake, and then all of a sudden there's only Johnson Controls in the building. Some are better than others. I mean, we are doing, right out here in New Carrollton, IP-enabled 1,100 LEDs throughout the building, 1995 building, 65% reduction in energy from a 1995 building under an ESCO. And right now is a very good time for financing because thanks to the sort of the work of the Fed, interest rates for everybody are low. They're very low for the federal government, but the margin between the private sector borrowing that we're getting on energy savings performance contracts right now and federal borrowing is only about 2–2.5%, which is about as tight as it's been in a long time. So it's a great idea. It's a really important one, but it also, it goes to the other question is that if you're going to use, and it goes whether you're going to build a building, whether you're going to do a renovation, whether you're going to build a house, whether you're going to buy a house. See, that was funny or what?
I thought it was
is you've got to be a smart consumer. You have to be a smart owner. You have to be a smart specifier, and make sure that you have enough knowledge that you just don't write the blank check. Because I would argue that if you write any company a blank check, they're unlikely to solve the problem that you want solved. They're very likely to solve their own problems. So I'm not a big fan of blank checks, frankly. But
And
it's a
if
great
I could
idea.
just put one more just thought into this conversation. All of a sudden, then if you take on the security side from the building perspective, is you actually have security products that when you go in and you look at the IT asset, it actually picks up the PUE from that device. Now all of a sudden, do you not only look at the statistics that we saw on the data centers, the buildings, et cetera, you can now look at the energy consumption of the infrastructure. And then the question is that, how do you upgrade that infrastructure out of the savings of the PUE? And that goes back to the analytic discussion, that you need to look at all of those variables. So at the end of the day, when you have a CIO, a facilities manager, and a technology arm from the IT perspective, now all of a sudden you can have not a 10% discussion, but you can have a 25% discussion. So it's just how you frame that RFI or that RFP.
Any comment on that, or do we have another question in the house? Yes.
Yes, here.
Yes. Say your name for us. I'll hold the mic, okay?
Hi, I'm Karen Nelson. I'm going to speak on behalf of the Sustainable Division of IIE. I'm on the board of that division. I'm going to kind of switch the conversation a little bit to you spoke about hardware, what the people were. As major, let's say, shapers of national policy and global policy, how can agencies such as GSA, Army, State, NSI, NIC help to, first of all, create sustainability literacy in an adult workforce that may not be totally comfortable with some of these ideas, as well as to shape some of the, let's say, the economic, financial accounting paradigms that will also help to drive the business model towards valuing energy and water the way they should be in the future. How can your organizations help drive that conversation?
And maybe are they? How are they? They are.
I mean, yeah,
I'll start on the little scale where a GSA is working. We have an app too. It's called the SF tool, or Sustainable Facilities Tool, and it's free. We built it for ourselves. We built it for facility managers to use, where they are doing small renovations and typically are not going to go out and get a lead AP qualified professional or an architect or an engineer. And it was a sort of a tool to help them make really good decisions. I'm making a little break room. What kind of materials do I use on the floor? What should I do? And some of it's really obvious, like you think you wouldn't need to say that you want to buy an Energy Star refrigerator today, but you still need to say it, because I can go into, sad to say, GSA buildings where people forgot to buy an Energy Star refrigerator. And it's important to get that stuff in there. One of my colleagues was actually in the classroom the day before yesterday teaching 9-year-olds in the Chicago school system using this tool, and it started out, and you get questions like, what's carbon dioxide? Why is it bad? Don't plants like it? And you can have a very, very different conversation with 9-year-olds, because it sort of opened your eyes. So we're doing things like that to get the word out. And again, we're also trying to use systematically in all of our procurements going much more towards a performance base, where we articulate the goals. That means we have to be really good at articulating sustainability goals. And the other key point that you put in your question in the beginning is that the human behavior component of sustainability is hugely important, and creating the conditions using a lot of the tools that have recently been uncovered by behavioral economics can really lead to significant behavior change without having to persuade people to behave differently, just by creating different kind of conditions. There was an interesting, when I was listening to the radio this morning while getting ready, there was an article, there was an oral article about the state of Maryland wondering why they didn't have more organ donors. Well, the classic, very first behavioral economic study was, why do some countries in Northern Europe have more organ donors than others? And the answer is really simple. When you go and you get a driver's license, if the box is pre-checked, I want to be an organ donor, and you have to uncheck it, you get 96% of the population wanting to be an organ donor. If it's the other way around, it's 26. Change the default condition to what you want. So I tell people, for example, we don't need no stinking occupancy sensors ever again. We need vacancy sensors. We only care when the room is empty to turn it off. People can figure out where the light switch is and turn the lights on if they need it. 9 times out of 10, when conference rooms are lit up during the day, they don't need to be lit because there's plenty of light from the windows. So those are the, I think is a great, terrific question, and now we get the larger view.
I like the, I was thinking about the fact, yeah, the default setting for our conference rooms is lights off. So yeah. Exactly. With our residential, for behavioral change, for our embassies, number one, we do turn it off campaigns, and some of those things work, some of them don't. For our residents, we find when the economics isn't there, if you're a foreign service officer and you're living overseas, the government will pay for your electricity, all right? So the economic incentive there for them to be responsible is missing. But providing them information about what they are consuming and that impact has actually helped. We see a 20% decrease in energy consumption from people's residence or apartments or houses simply by informing them of how they're doing and how they're doing compared to their peers. What I'm trying to get is, I've seen the software once before. In some of our embassies, they actually have real-time meters so they can log on and see what they're doing in real time. And we're finding that the kids actually find it the most fun, right? They run around and they're like, we'll shut this off, we'll shut this off. And they'll get to see the meter drop. And then what I want to actually see is a tree that, if you turn all the lights on in the house, it's near death. And then when you turn all the lights off, it's green and blooming. Something fun for the kids to play with and be educated at the same time. But yeah, for awareness, it's a lot of it for behavior. From our perspective, it's awareness of your impact and reinforcing that on a regular basis for communications. State Department, we have an internal stakeholder communications line that focuses on that.
And I just want to add a little in here. The Army has various campaigns. One of them for operational energy is the power is in your hand. And it is very important for people to be able to have these different campaigns. I mean, one of the things you mentioned was the billing, and yes, on an Army installation, it used to be that if you lived in the housing, you didn't pay your electric bill. And we have privatized our housing, and one of the things that we've done is they initially went to what was called mock billing. So if your energy use was at a certain level, you didn't have to pay. If it was below a certain level, you would get a refund. So when you put the knowledge in people's hands, that actually helps do that. And if your bill is above, then you will be paying extra. So, but the other thing is you have to have that command emphasis. And a lot of what we've done lately in the Army is because we have an Assistant Secretary, the Honorable Ms. Catherine Hammock, for Installations, Energy, and Environment. And she has basically taken that message to Congress, to any installation she goes to outside parties. So you have that command, you have to have that command emphasis. And so on our installations, similar to your embassies, your ambassador, just like our garrison commander, they have to be part of that solution. The children, Fort Riley, one of the things that the children were doing is they're trying to use the children to influence the adults. So it's not necessarily that it has to always be the leadership, but you have to have at various levels that emphasis there.
Sounds like there's great opportunity here for training And your question was a very good one. What about another question? We have time for one more, and then it's lunch. Yes, sir, I saw your hand earlier. Speak loudly.
Hi, my name is Brendan with Yahoo Solutions, Inc. This is a question for Mr. Van Dyke. As far as the sub-metering in foreign countries when there were no previous metering, how do they receive and are they very receptive to being able to change their pricing schematics based on what we're finding out they're charging us per kilowatt hour, per therm, whatever, per gallon?
That's a very good question. Diplomacy reigns on that territory right now, where, you know, we very much don't want to create a hustle with the local community. We will, if it does seem to be way out of stretch, have a gentleman or ladies discussion on how we could reduce that cost. But from our perspective on the sustainability bit, we're really focused on making sure our performance and our efficiency and our footprint is as small as it is. In that regard, the billing part is secondary.
All right, the most important announcement of the day. Lunch is on the second floor. For those with tickets, it's sponsored by Global Efficiency.